Today I'm going to teach you step by step how to make this super cute patriotic wreath in just 10 minutes using all Dollar Tree items. Welcome to Stillwater's Wreath Designs. Come on in. Today I'm going to show you how to make a super cute and quick patriotic red, white, and blue wreath for your front door using Dollar Tree items. Hey guys, it's Nikki here at Stillwater's Wreath Designs. If you are new to the channel, welcome, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and join us. We've got new tutorials uploading every single week. Okay, let me spin the camera around so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, we're going to use the 14-inch wire wreath frame from the Dollar Tree. And I've just grabbed a pack of red, white, and blue handkerchiefs from Amazon. You can also grab these at the Dollar Tree, but they're actually cheaper on Amazon. I'll make sure I leave this link for you below in the description of this video. You guys, you are not going to believe how simple this design is. Let's talk about this wire wreath frame, guys. So as you can see, there are 4 wire rings that go around this wreath frame. And then the distance between each crossbar, these are the crossbars, is considered a section. So we've got 6 sections in total on our wreath. And on 2 of those sections, we're going to use just the blue handkerchiefs. And then on the remaining 4, we're going to alternate back and forth between the red and white. The first thing we need to do is cut each of these handkerchiefs in half. We're going to use 3 blue, 3 white, and 3 red. I'm just going to cut them in half following that fold seam. We're going to start out by adding the blue to the first 2 sections of our wreath frame. So I'm just going to grab 1/2 of the handkerchief, or handkerchief strip, and then I'm going to just basically pinch and gather it right in the middle of that handkerchief half. On that seam, I'm going to fold it in half, and that closed end of my handkerchief loop is going to go underneath the wreath frame, and then I'll just pull those tails through that opening. Then I'll pull those tails so that our handkerchief strip is nice and tight on our frame. Okay, let's finish up with the blue. Remember, we're going to add 3 handkerchief strips per section in 2 sections, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, we're a quarter of the way there, guys. So we've added 6 strips of blue to 2 sections of our wreath, which represent the upper left corner of the USA flag. And now we're going to carry on with the red and white. We're going to cut 3 red handkerchiefs in half and 3 white. And then for the remaining 4 sections, we're going to alternate back and forth between the red and white, adding 3 strips per section on our wreath. And then I'll meet you back here. And this beauty is finished. What do you think? This design features items all purchased at the Dollar Tree. It's a budget-friendly beginner design. So the first thing we need to do, friends, is prepare our sign. And it comes with this little twine hanger. We don't need that, so go ahead and cut that guy right off. And we need to get this sign prepped, friends. And so what we're going to do is use 2 mounting squares so that we can attach our sign to our wreath when we get to that point. And if you're new to wreath making, you're not familiar with mounting squares, they are definitely a wreath maker's best friend, or at least one of them. These guys are just an 1" by 1" square. They're plastic on the front, and I'm not sure if the camera's capturing that, but there's holes all the way around so that you can run a zip tie, pipe cleaners, floral stems, whatever you'd like, through the mounting brackets to attach your sign or embellishment right down into your wreath. Then on the back side, you've got a really super sticky piece of 3M tape. And so you just literally peel the backing off. I typically use 2 mounting brackets for any type of sign. And you just push those guys right down onto your sign. And then I prefer to run a quick bead of glue right around that mounting bracket where it touches the sign, just for some extra strength and stability. And now we'll just set this sign off to the side to dry. And that's going to be the only time you need your glue gun. So you can go ahead and unplug that. Go ahead and cut the tag off of your wire wreath frame. And you probably noticed earlier I've actually grabbed 2 of each roll of Deco mesh from the Dollar Tree. Let's just have a quick wreath frame 101 here. If you're new to wreath making, this is what's called a wire wreath frame. You can get these nearly anywhere. They come in all different diameters. This is the 14-inch wire wreath frame from the Dollar Tree. And so this entire piece is your wire wreath frame. It's got 4 rings, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then it's also got 6 crossbars. These are the crossbars. And then the distance between one crossbar and the next is considered a section. So you've got 6 sections on the 14-inch frame. And this is a new to me method, friends. I'm excited to give this a try. This entire wreath is going to be made out of Dollar Tree material. So again, very cost effective and affordable. The only thing that did not come from the Dollar Tree would be my 6-inch zip ties. You can actually buy these in bulk online from any wreath making supply warehouse or even Amazon. I will link these below for you. This 6-inch zip tie is perfect for deco mesh attachments, embellishment attachments, things of that sort. So definitely something you want to keep in your stash. And you're going to need your ruler handy and a good pair of scissors. So let me show you what we're going to do here. We've got these 3 rolls of 6-inch deco mesh from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to cut off the edge of this blue one. It looks a little raggedy here, just to give it that clean cut. Let's take a look at our other 2 rolls. That looks pretty good, and that looks pretty good, actually. So if you're new to working with Deco Mesh loves to fray. So anytime you can create a wreath with minimal amounts of cuts, that really reduces the fray and helps preserve the longevity of your wreath. And this particular bubble wreath has very few cuts, so I'm excited to give it a try. I'm just going to pull out a handful of my zip ties and have those easily accessible. And again, you're going to use, I would say, between 45 and 50 of these guys. So you need a good amount available to you. You can see that the Deco Mesh likes to curl in on itself, basically following the roll of how it came to you. And we're going to lay all 3 colors on top of one another. A solid white would have looked equally great with this wreath idea, but my particular Dollar Tree didn't have any available. So we're going to just make do. We're going to marry up those ends pretty well. And we're just laying these guys right on top of one another. Like so. Now hang with me, friends. This is going to go somewhere cute, I promise. So once you've got all 3 of your rolls laying on top of each other, you're going to just kind of scrunch and gather that end into your fingers until you've got all of that Deco Mesh bunched up together nicely. And you've got this 1 to 1.5 inch tail. I'm just going to trim these scragglies off. So once you have that bunch, go ahead and grab your wire wreath frame, and all of our Deco Mesh here, we're going to be focusing on rings 2 and 3, those inner 2 metal rings on your wreath form. And we want to start out on the crossbar just because that's a good anchor, right? And so I'm going to run my 6-inch zip tie here, if you can see. Hopefully the camera's capturing that for you. Right over very middle space, so between rings 2 and 3. Then I'm going to take my Deco Mesh and lay that right on top of that crossbar, making sure I'm keeping that 1 inch or so tail. I'm going to take my zip tie and cinch this guy down. And because we've gone over that crossbar, it's really going to anchor in nicely. So you really want to cinch that tight, tight, tight. One other tool I forgot to mention earlier, you need a good pair of small snips. If you don't have any in your wreath making stash, I'll leave a link for my favorite pair below so you can grab some if you'd like. Then you'll snip off that excess bit of zip tie. And we're going to basically make 7 bubbles per section. And remember, section is from one crossbar to the next. And so what you're going to do is take your ruler, and where your zip tie is, you're going to measure out 8 inches, okay? So I'm measuring out 8 inches, doesn't have to be perfect. I'm then going to scrunch and gather into my fingers. I'm going to come back in to my wreath frame. We're going to take our zip tie and wrap that around rings 2 and 3 of our wreath base, those inner 2 rings. We're going to start the zip tie right at that 8 inches that we've measured out. We're going to scooch that deco mesh so that we can get it as close to that recent most recent zip tie that we anchored it down with. And we're going to cinch that guy tight, trim off our excess bit of zip tie, and we've just made our first deco mesh bubble. So you can see it's tall, it's fairly thin, and we've abutted that as best as we can. They will slide a little bit, that's totally fine. And we're going to do this over and over, and you want to add 7 deco mesh bubbles to each section. And so again, we're going to measure out to that 8-inch mark. And again, not looking for perfection. Nobody's going to be measuring your bubbles. Scrunch and gather that into your hand. Grab a zip tie. Wrap that around rings 2 and 3. Add that right around where your 8-inch mark was, where your hand was. Just cinching it nearly all the way down. I'm going to make sure my mesh there isn't going anywhere, and then I'll shove this guy over and cinch it down. Grab my snips, trim off that excess bit of zip tie, and we've just added our second bubble. We're going to do this whole section together, and then we'll zoom through. Remember, we're going to add 7 deco mesh bubbles per section. You may have to straighten your mesh up a little bit from time to time. It just takes a jiffy. So again, we're going to measure from our most recent zip tie out to 8 inches. We'll scrunch and gather that together in our fingers. We're going to grab one of our zip ties and run that around rings 2 and 3, those center 2 rings. We're going to cinch that down most of the way. Just making sure our deco mesh is all bunched up together, going the right direction. I'll scooch that guy over and cinch it down the rest of the way. And we're going to take our snips and trim off the tail of that zip tie. We've now added 3 deco mesh bubbles. Let's move on to the next. I'm going to take my ruler, measure out 8 inches. Scrunch and gather this mesh into my hands. I'll grab a hold of it with one hand, grab a zip tie with the other, run it around rings 2 and 3. Up over our deco mesh, and I'm going to cinch that guy down most of the way. Make sure our deco mesh is all going the right direction. Scoot that bubble over and cinch it down the rest of the way. I'll grab my snips, trim off the tail of that zip tie. We've now added 4 deco mesh bubbles, and we're on to bubble number 5. We're going to measure out 8 inches. Let me straighten up my mesh here. It's a little squirrely. Measure out 8 inches. I'm just going to scrunch and gather that mesh into our hands. Make sure that mesh is all going the right direction. We'll grab a zip tie, run it around rings 2 and 3. We'll cinch this guy down most of the way. Scoot him over where he belongs. Finish cinching down our zip tie here. Grab our snips and trim off that tail. We're on to bubble number 6, friends. Just going to measure out 8 inches from most recent zip tie, scrunch and gather in my fingers. Grab a zip tie. As you get towards the last couple of bubbles here, it's a little bit tougher. Give yourself some grace. Wrap that zip tie around rings 2 and 3, those center 2 rings. Cinch that guy down most of the way. Push that bubble in. Cinch it down the rest of the way and trim off the tail of that zip tie. All right, friends, we're on to bubble number 7. Last bubble for this section, so I'm just going to measure out 8 inches, scrunch and gather with my fingers. I'm going to grab a zip tie, run that through rings 2 and 3 right there in the center, those center 2 rings. I'll anchor it down most of the way. Make sure that deco mesh didn't get squirrely. I'm just straightening it out a little bit with my fingers, and then I'll push it over to the side, cinch it down the rest of the way, and trim off that tail. You can then just kind of come through and fluff that a little bit. You know, if you've got some room, you can scooch them a little bit. Perfect. So we've added our first section of 8-inch deco mesh bubbles, and we're going to continue this process all the way around our wire wreath frame. At some point, probably halfway through, maybe a little bit further past, you'll have to go ahead and break out your second rolls of deco mesh. You'll just follow that same method that we did when we began here and anchor it down with an inch tail. So go ahead and fill in the rest of your wire wreath frame with your 8-inch bubbles, 7 per section, and I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, I've fully loaded this wreath base with all of these super cute bubbles. And now I'm just going to trim off this last little bit of mesh, leaving approximately an inch or so tail. Just be real careful where you cut, friends. You don't want to accidentally cut one of your bubbles. There we go. So this is all I had left. Ironically, I just had a teeny tiny smidge of both the red, the blue and the red, white, and blue, and none of the white. I'm not really sure how that happened, but nonetheless, here we have it. And so the back of your wreath should look something like this, pretty clean. And the front of your wreath is full of all these super cute bubbles. Now, let me have a little full disclosure moment, friends. I don't generally use, in a tutorial, Dollar Tree mesh because, as I'm sure you discovered when you were making this, there's a lot of strings, a lot of fraying. It's a little bit sloppy and unprofessional. And because of that, I choose to use nearly always a much higher quality deco mesh. But because this wreath involved no cutting other than our ends, I thought that it would be safe to try, and so far I'm pleased with it. And so now that we've loaded our wire frame with bubbles, it's time to fluff the bubbles. And so let me show you what fluffing the bubbles means. You're going to start at any bubble. At this point, there's no top or bottom of your wreath. And we're just going to kind of pull this mesh apart. So right now, all 3 layers of your deco mesh are laying one on top of the other, and they're scrunched together to give you this bubble method. And we're just going to kind of pull them apart. And so you've got 3 layers in there, and we're just separating the 3 layers. And I kind of want to go back and forth. So since I pulled the blue to the outside on this bubble, on the next one, I'm just going to pull it to the inside. And you're basically just pulling on your deco mesh with really no rhyme or reason, other than you don't want to follow the same pattern twice. So we're going to work our way through this deco mesh bubble method wreath, separating those bubbles just by tugging on them, and they don't have to be 100% separate. It's however you want to do it. It's your wreath. Just don't follow the same steps every time because you really want to give lots of variety. So go ahead and separate all of your bubbles. one by one, working your way through your wreath here, and then I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, we've fluffed out all of our bubbles, and look how cute this is. You know, I keep looking at this, and quite honestly, I'm surprised it turned out as cute as it did. If you find any stowaway strings from your Deco mesh, just go ahead and trim them off. And our next step is to add our decorative sign. At this point, it's nice and dry, and you can attach this guy down with some extra long zip ties, some pipe cleaners or Chanel stems, or some floral wire. I always like to use floral wire stems to attach my signs and my heavier embellishment. I just feel like that they're easier to work with. If you are new to wreath making, you're definitely going to want to add some floral wire stems to your wreath stash, friends. They're great for adding pieces into Deco mesh because they poke right through. I'll actually leave a link for these below if you'd like to grab some and add them to your wreath making stash. They're very cost effective. And these guys are 18 inches in length, and they're a heavier gauge, so they're nice and sturdy. And I just fold that in half loosely just to find that V center point, which tells me where the middle of that floral wire is, and I run it right through my bracket. And then I'm just giving it a couple of loose twists so it doesn't get swirly and slide off. Then we'll do the same thing to add our second. Folded it into a V to find that center, running it through my mounting bracket and giving it a couple of loose twists. Of course, you can add your sign depending on what you're using anywhere on your wreath that you would like. I'm actually going to add my sign right in the middle. I think that would be just perfect. And so all you're going to do one at a time here, or one side at a time, I should say, is just take those floral wires and poke them right in through your mesh. I'm going to go ahead and separate a bubble. I am with my fingers kind of trying to find an area by a crossbar just for this upper piece to keep it from sliding it around. Give yourself some grace, takes a little bit of time. Once my wires are ran through, I'm just going to make sure that that sign's laying where I want it to be, and then I'm going to hold it in place with my hands. And then I'll take those floral wire stems and anchor them around that crossbar, giving them 2 or 3 tight twists at about 80% tension. Then I'll trim those ends off with my wire snips, and I'll curl them back in with a pair of needle nose pliers. We'll follow that same method for the lower bracket as well. Look how super cute this turned out. We have made this entire beauty for exactly $10. Now that doesn't include your tax or the cost for your zip ties. So at this point, it is super cute as it is, but of course, you know me, I'd like to add a bougie bow. So bear with me 1 second while I make a super quick and easy bow to add in for a little extra flair, and I'll meet you back here. Just thrown together a quick hand bow here. If you are new to wreath making or bow making and would like a step-by-step tutorial, I'll leave a couple of links for you below in the description of this video. That'll give you some of that step-by-step guidance when it comes to bow making. So I'm just going to add this right up here in the corner. I am using floral wire stems to secure this guy down just like we did earlier. And I'm going to wrap it right around the corner here. I'm going to make sure that goes on nice and tight so that it doesn't go anywhere. And then I'll take my snips and trim off that excess bit of floral wire. And we'll toss those guys away. I'm going to grab my needle nose pliers again, pinch those ends together, and curl it back into the wreath so it doesn't poke us or our customer. Then I'm going to take a couple of minutes here and just fluff out my bow. I've got 4 loops of this 2.5 inch ribbon with those super cute glittery stars. Adorable. And then I've got just 2 loops of our red and white star. So I'm going to make the 2.5 inch in a broad X, as you can see here. And then I'm just going to run the red and white 1.5 inch straight across, or I should say diagonal since we're up here in the corner. And I'm going to dovetail them to match our sign. Of course, you could also angle cut. We are definitely getting our patriotic vibe going here. You can grab some ribbon also from the Dollar Tree. This is something I just had in my stash. We made this entire wreath for exactly $10. That doesn't include the ribbon or the zip ties. But with the ribbon and zip ties, you're still probably not looking at more than $15. So this is a super cute and easy patriotic wreath that you can make that's very budget friendly. Hi guys, it's Nikki here at Stillwater's Wreath Designs, and today I'm going to teach you a super simple way to make a stunning wreath with just one single roll of 10-inch Deco mesh. Come on in. You'll find a full materials list for you below in the description of this video so that you can recreate this beauty. Of course, you'll also find the Etsy link if you'd rather just purchase today's design. Okay, let's dive in. We'll be using this 10-inch in diameter patriotic welcome sign, 4 different types of wired ribbon, a single roll of 10-inch poly jute mesh, and a work wreath form. All right, guys, so if you're new to wreath making, this is what's called a work wreath form. It is 15 inches in diameter. It's got 2 levels, the upper and the lower, and then all of these, what we call ties, on the work wreath frame. You'll want to take those lower level ties and point them outwards like sunshine. So at this point, your wreath doesn't have a top or bottom. We're going to start at any lower level set of ties. You're going to have your mesh in front of you so that it's curl side down. And for today's one roll method, we're going to do the poof and curl method. So I've got about 12 to 18 inches extended here so that I can work with the mesh. And the first thing we need to do is anchor the mesh into our wreath base, starting at any lower level set of ties. And all I'm going to do here, guys, is place my hands at the edge of our mesh. I'm going to press down with my thumbs to hold that mesh stationary. And then with my other 8 fingers, I'm just going to walk that mesh back into my hand, just like that. So once you've got that Deco mesh tail, go ahead and open up any of the lower level set of ties into a wide V. Then tuck that tail back and under. And what that does is hide away the raw edge of your mesh. If you're new to working with Deco mesh loves to fray. So anything that we can do as creators to help reduce that fray is ideal. So we're going to take that tail, place it all the way down to the center of those ties, all the way at the base of the V, and give it 2 tight twists. And then we'll point those ties outwards once again. And we just anchored down our Deco mesh. You can see I've got a self-healing mat in the background. I'm going to use it to measure my mesh. If you don't have a self-healing mat, just grab a ruler. We're going to make 10-inch poofs. And so I've got my tie on the 14-inch mark, so I need to come out to the 24-inch mark to create that 10-inch poof. Once you've identified that 10-inch mark, you're just going to scrunch and gather your mesh into your hand just like we did before. Pinch that together. Come to the very next set of lower level ties. Take that pinch of mesh and place it all the way down to the base of the V of those ties. And give those ties a couple of tight twists. And point them outwards. We just added our first 10-inch poof. Let's do one more together and then we'll speed ahead. So you're going to identify that 10-inch mark, scrunch and gather your mesh, come to the very next set of lower level ties, open them into a wide V, take that mesh and place it all the way to the base of that V, and give it your ties a couple of tight twists. We just added our second 10-inch poof. Go ahead and add 10-inch poofs all the way around the lower level of your work wreath form, and I'll meet you back here. So it's time to add our last lower level poof, and we're going to add that right on top to where we anchor our mesh down at the beginning. So we're going to follow the same pattern that we've been doing all the way around. We're going to gently untie those ties, and that mesh has memory, so it's not going to go anywhere. Place that pinch of mesh from your last poof all the way down to the base and give it a couple of tight twists. So we've just added our last lower level poof. Now it's time to jump our mesh up to the upper level to repeat that same process. First, I'm just going to point those ties towards the center of our wreath frame. And we're going to jump our mesh up to the closest set of ties on that upper level. We're not going to make a poof here, guys. We're just going to pull that mesh tautly. We'll come in behind that set of ties. I'll zoom in here for you. We're going to place that mesh that we've just jumped to the upper level all the way to the base of those ties and give them a couple of tight twists. So you can see I just jumped that mesh cleanly from the lower to the upper level. I came in behind those set of ties and anchored them down at the base. And now I can continue on with adding poofs to our wreath frame. The only difference between the upper level and the lower level is the poofs will be 8-inch poofs for our upper level, not 10. That just lets those poofs recede in a little bit so that you can still see the lower level of your wreath frame, but otherwise you'll follow the same pattern. Identify that 8-inch mark, scrunch and gather that mesh. Just doing this in my hand here so you can see how we anchor down. Open up that very next set of ties into a V, place that mesh all the way down to the base, and you guessed it, give it a couple of tight twists to secure it down and point those guys inwards. We've just added our first upper level poof. Go ahead and add 8-inch poofs all the way around that upper level of your wreath, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, it's time to add our last poof into our wreath base. So I've identified that 8-inch mark. I'm pinching and gathering that mesh. And we're going to add it right on top of where we jumped our mesh from the lower to the upper level. So again, carefully untwist those ties. Open those ties into a V. Take the pinch of mesh for your last poof here and place it all the way down to the center of those ties and give them a tight, tight twist. And we've just added our last upper level poof. So now we need to trim away the remainder of the roll of mesh. So I'm going to zoom in here, guys, and show you how I do that. I just place my hand between the remaining roll of mesh and the neighboring poof. And I just do that so that my hand serves as kind of a guard to make sure I don't cut anything I'm not supposed to. I'm going to come up about 1 inch from that last set of ties and trim away that mesh. So here is what our base is looking like at this point. We've added all of our poofs in, and now it's time to cut the remainder of our roll of Deco mesh into curls. For this next step, we'll be using the self-healing mat and rotary cutter. If you don't have those items, guys, no worries. Just grab a ruler and a good pair of scissors. But let me show you, if you're new to wreath making, what a rotary cutter is. It basically looks like a mini pizza cutter, and it lets you cut your mesh with nice clean lines and quickly. And then the self-healing mat that you see here in the background has measurements running both vertically and horizontally, so you can easily measure out your items. I'll make sure that I leave a link for both of these items below in the description of this video, so that you can add those to your toolbox if you need to. So what I'm going to do is just trim this mesh so that we've got a clean line here. And we're going to cut the entire remainder of our roll into 8-inch pieces. So I'm just going to measure out the 8-inch mark on my self-healing mat and cut. So go ahead and cut up the remainder of your roll into 8-inch pieces, and then I'll meet you back here. Once you've got your the remainder of your roll cut up into 8-inch pieces. We'll go ahead and add curls into our wreath base. And to add curls, guys, you're just going to take a single piece of Deco mesh that you just cut. You'll lay that in your workstation, curl side up, and you're just going to roll that into a cylindrical tube, or as we say in wreath making, a curl. So it should look something like this, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter here in the center. And then of course it flares out at the ends. And we're going to add 1 curl to every single set of ties on our wreath base. So to add a curl, you'll just come to any set of ties, take that curl and place it at the center of the V of those ties all the way down to the base. Give those ties a couple of tight twists, and you've just added your first curl. Let's do one more together and then we'll speed ahead. So you'll grab your piece of Deco mesh, bring it to your work area, curl side up, roll that guy into a cylindrical tube, come to any set of ties on your wreath base, open those ties into a wide V, place that curl all the way down to the base, and give those ties a couple of tight twists. Let's go ahead and add our curls into our wreath, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, we've just finished adding in the curls, and look how stinking cute this wreath base is, you guys. What I love about the one roll of mesh method is that it doesn't leave you with questionable scrap rolls of mesh. You know exactly what you need to complete the design. And look how stinking cute that is. So this is the poof and curl method. The next step is to add in ribbon tails. So let me set this off to the side and grab my ribbon. So today we're going to use 4 different types of wired ribbon. You can use as many or as few as you would like. Just make sure that whatever ribbon you choose is wired. I'm going to use 2 different 2.5-inch ribbon types and 2 1.5-inch ribbon types. And remember, we've got 18 sets of ties on our wreath frame. Now we are going to reserve 1 set of ties on the upper level for a bow. So we're just going to need 17 sets of ribbon tails for our wreath. And I'm going to alternate back and forth between 2 combinations. We'll use these 2 ribbons together as a pairing and these 2. So we'll need 8 sets of tails of one combination and 9 sets of tails of the other combination, in whatever order you prefer. Let me show you a quick way to measure out your ribbon tails here, guys. There's lots of tools out there that you can buy, like ribbon boards and things of that sort, but you can also just do a quick measurement. So all I do, I'm going to use my self-healing mat here. Of course, you can use your ruler if you don't have a self-healing mat. We want our tails to be 11 inches in length. So I'm going to identify that 11-inch mark. Mark that with my finger. I'm not looking for perfection here, guys. No one's going to measure. And then I'm going to fold this ribbon accordion style for the total number of pieces that I need. We'll do 9 of this set. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Once you've got that total number of tails folded accordion style, just trim away the rest of the ribbon roll. Now we're going to take our scissors and separate those tails. We'll spin that ribbon stack around and do the same thing on the opposite end. And I'm just going to layer them so that they're right side up. And then in groups of 3, I'll trim my ends. So I'm just going to grab 3 pieces, make sure those ends are married up nicely. For this particular wreath, guys, we're just going to do angle trimmed ribbon tail ends. So I'm coming down about 3/4 of an inch and cutting up diagonally to the corner. We'll flip that ribbon stack around. Now make sure you know the strength of your scissors. Cut as many as your scissors can do comfortably, and come down 3/4 of an inch and cut up diagonally. So we've just trimmed our ends. I'm going to put them off to the side. We're going to repeat this pattern for all the ribbon types. Remember, you're going to need 9 sets of tails of one ribbon combination and 8 of the other. And your ribbon tails need to be approximately 11 inches in length. So go ahead and get your ribbon tails prepped, and then I'll meet you back here. Once you've got your ribbon tails cut and ready to go, go ahead and scoot them off to the side. Grab your wreath frame, and we'll start loading in our ribbon tails. We're going to add 2 ribbon strips to every single set of ties all throughout our wreath frame, with the exception of one upper level set of ties, which we will reserve for a bow. At this point, guys, your wreath doesn't have a top or bottom, so you can start anywhere. And let me show you how we're going to add these in. We'll do 2 together and then speed ahead. I'm going to go back and forth between my 2 ribbon combinations. So I'm literally going to take my 1.5 inch ribbon strip, lay that right on top of the 2.5 inch. I'm going to eyeball to find the center. You're welcome to measure, or you can just fold in half to identify that center point. And then you just give that a pinch right there at the center. I kind of pull it into a V over my thumb. You're going to come to any set of ties on your wreath frame. Open those ties into a V and place your ribbon tails all the way down to the base. And give those ties 2 or 3 super tight twists. Once you've added those tails in, go ahead and trim off the excess bits of your ties. We won't be using those anymore. And toss them away. I just take my fingers then and kind of curl those ties back and under, and then I fluff my ribbon tails. And by fluff, guys, all I'm really doing is pulling them outwards away from the center of our wreath. And so let's do one more together, and then we'll speed ahead. I've grabbed my 2 ribbon strips. I'm going to lay the 1.5 inch ribbon strip right on top of the 2.5. I'll fold those in half to find that center. I'm going to give that a pinch in the middle there and kind of fold it into a loose V over my thumb. I'll come to that next set of ties and open them into a V and place those ribbon tails all the way down to the center of that V, all the way at the base. Give those ties 2 or 3 tight twists. And I'm going to trim off the excess bit of ties. I'm just using my small snips here, guys. I'll leave a link for those below if you need to add them to your toolbox. Then I'm just going to tuck those remaining tie bits underneath and fluff out or straighten out my tails. Just like that. I'm going to repeat this pattern all the way throughout my wreath, reserving 1 set of ties on the upper level for our bow. So let's go ahead and get our ribbon tails added in, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, guys, we've got all of our tails added into our wreath, and look how stinking cute this beauty is turning out to be. So at this point, our wreath is approximately 26 inches in diameter and probably 8 or so inches in depth at its widest point. So now we're going to add our sign into our wreath. So this is the sign that we'll be using, and I'm not sure if the camera is capturing it or not, but it's basically a really dense, weather-resistant foam. If the sign that you're using is wood, I would recommend that you use mounting brackets. I'll leave a link for those below for you to easily attach your sign. But because this is a foam sign, I'm going to use 2 20-gauge floral wire stems and my small jewelry hole punch to attach this guy in. Remember, we've left a set of ties open here at the top to attach our bow. So our bow will be here and then flowing down a bit. And I'd like my sign to be on the opposite side at a little bit of an angle. So I'm going to take my hole punch, come in about 1/2 inch and just punch. And that's going to make a nice clean hole. So I'm just eyeballing where I want those at. This is such a handy tool, guys. Then I'm going to take my floral wire stem and fold it in half just to identify that center point. I'm going to run that right through. I know it's green, but I promise it's not going to look offensive. I'm going to pull that tautly to the back side and just spin that a couple of times so that it doesn't come undone. And then we'll do the same thing at that lower level hole that we added into our sign. So now I'm just going to run this right through my wreath, right through the mesh. Give yourself some grace here, guys. I'm going to give those floral wire stems 2 or 3 more twists just to make sure that guy's nice and anchored down. Then I'm going to use my small snips to trim off those excess bits of floral wire and toss them away. And I'm going to take my needle nose pliers and just pinch those ends together and kind of curl them back into the wreath. That way if someone happens to grab the wreath right there, they're not going to get poked. Perfect. So just take a quick second here, and any of those tails that might have got stuffed underneath there or curls, just go ahead and pull them back out so they're peeking underneath. That is looking so cute. Okay, let's move on to making our bow. So I'm just going to grab a pipe cleaner, fold that guy into a loose V and set it off to the side. My scissors, and all 4 of the ribbon types that we use for our tails, and I'm going to make a quick hand bow. I'm going to speed through this process here, guys, but I will leave a bow tutorial for you below in the description of this video, so if you need some help with making your bows, you can reference those quick tutorials. So I'm going to take just a second and pull all of those tails in one direction, but we're not going to worry about those loops or fluffing them out until we've added this into our wreath. So I'm going to bring my wreath back into my work area. We're going to use those ties that we've reserved to anchor this bow stack down. So I've just opened them into a wide V. I'm going to place that bow stack right in the center and use those ties to anchor that down in. And then I'll just curl those bits out of the way. If your ties are lengthy, just go ahead and trim them off. And now we're going to take a couple of minutes to fluff out our bow. So all I'm going to do is, starting at the back, spread those loops out. And open them up. Bow fluffing is something that you need to give yourself grace with, guys. Takes a little while. I always start at the back or the bottom and work my way forward, but you can certainly fluff your bow any way you'd like. I've got 6 total loops of the 2.5 inch ribbon and 5 of the 1.5 inch ribbon. I'm going to grab my scissors and angle trim the ends of my ribbon tails. I know they're lengthy tails, but we're going to curl them in just a minute. When you're trimming your ribbon tails, I always like to caution you to trim carefully. You can always take more off, but you can't put it back on once you've trimmed it away. So cut carefully. I'm just going to grab a cardboard insert. This is actually the center of the Deco mesh roll that we just used to make this wreath. I always keep one in my toolbox because this is the perfect tool to curl your ribbon. And to curl your ribbon tails, guys, all you're going to do is start at the bottom of your cardboard insert and roll that ribbon tail all the way up to the center of your bow and release. And you'll have this cute little curl. If the curl's too tight, you can pull on it and that'll relax it a bit. If it's too loose, just recurl. I'm going to take a couple of minutes and curl all of my tails here. How stinking cute. Okay, I'm going to come back in and just fluff those bow loops one more time, just to make sure they're all standing to attention. How cute is this, you guys? Oh my goodness. Adorable. Okay, we've got just one more step, so go ahead and plug in your hot glue gun. And we're going to add just a little bit of greenery into our wreath just to give it some freshness. Let me scoot this off to the side and I'll show you what we'll be using. Use this greenery vine from Hobby Lobby. If you're new to wreath making, guys, you will soon learn that florals will always be at the top of your expense list when making wreaths. So I'll just let you know that Hobby Lobby has their florals on sale for 40% off every other week. So be mindful of those sales when you're grabbing your florals. And we're going to add one greenery bit to every single space where we had a tie in the wreath. Okay, let's get these glued in. So we're just going to take a single bit of greenery, run a bead of hot glue right down that stem, and add it to each place on our wreath that once had a set of ties. You can use your scissors or something to poke that in. The little bits of material on those leftover ties are great for anchoring down. We're just going to add one bit of greenery to every single space. And this beauty is finished. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's move on to our next design. And we're going to add 3 pipe cleaners per section. We'll start with the inner section. So if we take a look at these rings, friends, and we would say this is ring 1, ring 2, ring 3, and ring 4, you're going to first focus on the inner 2 rings, rings 1 and 2. And all you're going to do is add 1 pipe cleaner around rings 1 and 2 in the center of each section. So you're just going to wrap that around rings 1 and 2, give it a couple of tight twists, and then point those guys towards the inside of your wire frame. Once you've got your 6 pipe cleaners added to the inner area of your wire wreath frame, it's time to then add the pipe cleaners to the outer ring. And we're going to do the exact same thing. However, we're going to be adding 2 per section all the way around your wire wreath frame. And you're just going to take your pipe cleaner, wrap it around rings 3 and 4, give them a couple of tight twists, and this time point them outwards. And so you're just going to center those as best as you can, leaving 1.5 inches or so to 2 inches between the crossbar and chenille stem number 1, and then a couple of inches between your 2 pipe cleaners and then also that last crossbar. And you're just going to follow the same recipe all the way around. All right, friends, so we've added in 18 pipe cleaners into the 14-inch wire wreath frame. And now what we're going to do is go ahead and grab your glue gun and all the way around your wreath frame where your pipe cleaner meets the wreath frame, you're just going to give it a little bead of glue so it runs right over the top of your chenille stem or your pipe cleaner and onto your wreath frame. Once you get all of your beads of glue ran along those pipe cleaners, go ahead and set your work wreath frame off to the side to let that glue have a little bit of time to dry, and we'll start prepping our deco mesh. All right, friends, we're going to use 3 different types of 10-inch deco mesh. So grab your self-healing mat and your rotary cutters, or a tape measure and scissors if you don't have the rotary cutter and self-healing mat. And we're going to cut 18-inch pieces of this striped mesh for the Cruffle. So that's an easy way to remember, friends. You've got 18 pipe cleaners on your wreath frame, So you need 18 pieces at 18 inches in length. We're just going to roll this out and cut it at 18 inches in length and 18 pieces. So go ahead and cut your 18 pieces and I'll meet you back here. Now that you've got your 18 pieces of 18-inch Deco mesh cut and ready to load, go ahead and grab a chip clip or binder clip, even a clothespin is just fine, as you see here, and your work wreath frame. By now that glue should be nice and dry and ready for you to begin loading. And we're going to add 1 cruffle of our red, white, and blue Deco mesh to every single pipe cleaner. And to make a cruffle, your Deco mesh likes to curl in on itself, and we're going to follow that natural flow, folks. And the reason why I really prefer cruffles is because Deco mesh loves to fray, and a cruffle really helps to prevent that fray. And so what you're going to do is take the end of your first piece of Deco mesh and roll it in on itself 2 or 3 times. Basically, what you're doing is tucking in those ends so that they get very little exposure and won't fray. And then flip it over. And then at the other end, give it a couple of rolls, and then take your fingers and scrunch and gather until you reach the end of your Deco mesh. Then you can remove your clip and pinch it in the middle, and what you've got here is what we call a cruffle. And so what cruffle really means is that there's a curl on each end and a ruffle in the middle, hence the cruffle. And you can bring your cruffle into any pipe cleaner, doesn't matter if you start on the top or bottom, keeping that pinched between your fingers. Add that cruffle into your first set of pipe cleaners, just open them up into a wide V. Place that cruffle all the way down at the center of that V and give it a couple of tight twists. And you've just added your first cruffle. Let's make one more together and then we'll speed through this process. So again, grab your Deco mesh, fold in one end 2 or 3 times to really tuck away those ends and prevent the fray. Flip it around, fold it in a couple of times on the other end. Take your fingers and scrunch and gather all the way through until you reach the other side. Pinch that with your fingers. Move on to your next set of pipe cleaners. Open them up into a wide V. Place that cruffle all the way down in the center at the base and give it a couple of tight twists. We're going to repeat the same step all the way around until you've got 1 cruffle added to both the inner and the outer rings. All of your pipe cleaners should have 1 cruffle, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, friends, we've just added our 18 pieces of 18-inch Deco mesh into our wreath frame. We've got 1 cruffle added into each set of pipe cleaners or chenille stems. So your wreath should look something like this. All right, so the next step is our next layer of Deco mesh. This is looking really good, but it's still pretty light and airy. And so we want to give that a little bit more depth and dimension with some more Deco mesh. So go ahead and set your wreath off to the side. And we're going to grab the other 2 colors of Deco mesh that we have here. So we're going to use this pretty red and this metallic-y blue to make curls to add into our wreath. And we're going to add 1 curl per set of pipe cleaners or chenille stems. And since we've got 18 ties on our wreath frame, we'll do 9 of each. And we're going to do these in 10-inch cuts. So grab your scissors and ruler or your self-healing mat and rotary cutter, and we're going to cut 9 pieces of each color at 10 inches in length. So go ahead and get your curls cut, and I'll meet you back here. Now that you've got 18 10-inch curl pieces of Deco mesh cut, 9 of each color, we're going to go ahead and add those into our wreath. So go ahead and pull your wreath back up to your work area. And let me show you how we make a curl. Super easy. And it really helps to give your Deco mesh wreath lots of extra depth and dimension. So go ahead and grab one of your 10-inch pieces here. And as you can see, again, it likes to curl in on itself. And so curl side up. You're just going to start at one end and curl the entire wreath, or roll, excuse me, curl the entire piece of Deco mesh all the way to the end until you've got this little tube here. And it's probably, an inch in diameter here at my fingertips, probably 2 inches on the ends because it bulks out a little bit. And all you're going to do is pinch that curl right in the middle with your fingers. And then coming into your wreath, you're going to go to any set of chenille stems and seam side down of your curl, press that all the way down to the center of that chenille stem or pipe cleaner and give it a couple of tight twists. And you've just added your first curl. And because we're using 2 colors, I'm going to go back and forth between the 2 colors. So I'll grab my blue. I'm letting it lay on the mat here at curl side up. And at one end, I'm just going to start rolling this up into a cylindrical tube. I'm going to pinch that in the middle. And I'll come to my next set of pipe cleaners, seam side down on that curl right in the middle. I'll press that all the way down to the base of this V of the chenille stem here, pipe cleaner, and give it a couple of tight twists. You're going to do this all the way around your entire wreath, friends, on both the lower and the upper levels, so that each chenille stem or pipe cleaner gets 1 curl. I prefer to alternate back and forth with my colors. You can certainly load your curls in wherever you'd like. It's your wreath. So let's go ahead and get our curls loaded, and I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, we've got all of our curls added into our wreath. Just look at how much more depth and dimension this beauty has with all of those extra curls. Really looking super patriotic, and I'm already really loving this. So the next step for us, we need to make a bow. So go ahead and set your wreath off to the side and grab your wired ribbon of choice. You can choose to use the same ribbon. You can use multiple different types, such as I am doing here. Doesn't matter how many you use or how little, just make sure that whatever ribbon you are using is wired. I'm just going to make a quick and simple hand bow. I'll probably move through this bow making fairly quickly. Most people fluff their bows out before they add them into their wreaths. I'm kind of backwards when it comes to that. I don't usually fluff them until I've added them in, but you can certainly do what you'd like to do. I'm just going to make sure that all my tails are going the right direction here. At this point, friends, there's really no top or bottom to your wreath, and so you'll need to kind of think through where you want to place your embellishments or your sign or your ribbon tails, whatever you're going to do. For my purposes, I'm going to actually add my bow to the upper area here. And then I've got this cute sign that I actually got from the Dollar Tree as well. But I'm going to be hanging down here, and then I'll be throwing some ribbon tails in, just so you can understand the method behind my madness. So we're going to go ahead and add our bow into any one of these top. Remember, we've still got our pipe cleaners and our chenille stems. So any one of these top sets, wherever you'd like your bow to be placed, you're going to add them in with one of your pipe cleaner sets here. Now you don't want to press it too far down because you don't want your bow to disappear and sink. Give it 2 or 3 tight twists, and then just get your snips and trim off the excess bit of your pipe cleaner there, because now you're finished with that. And then take that little nub of pipe cleaner and just curl it down and out of the way. Feel free to fluff your bow if you'd like. I'm going to hold off for just a bit. So when I add this sign in, friends, I'm not super fond of the top part of this sign. I just really like that truck. So if you're going to trim this apart, such as you're going to want some wire cutters. Most things from the Dollar Tree cut pretty easily, quite honestly. So I'm literally just snipping that chain and taking that sign right off. So now we've got just the truck here, and I think we're going to add this down below. So now we can just set this truck off to the side, and we will attach that as part of our last steps here. But first we need to add some ribbon tails in. So remember, we've got 18 pipe cleaner stems here, and we've used 2 of them because we attached the bow in one area, and then we've got the cascade attached in another. So that leaves us with 16 available ties. So set your wreath off to the side. I'm going to add the 1.5 inch ribbons to the top row of chenille stems and the 2.5 inch ribbon to the bottom part. And because this is so colorful, we're just going to add 1 ribbon tail per chenille stem. So we're going to add 1 piece of 2.5 inch ribbon to every set of pipe cleaners on the lower level. We'll use the wider on the lower level just to give it some more depth and dimension. There are 10 sets of pipe cleaners, and we've got the 2 ribbon types, so we need 5 of each. And so I'm going to cut them at 10 inches, and all I'm going to do is measure out my ribbon to the 10-inch mark, and then I'm going to fold it over onto itself until I've got 5 pieces. So there's 1, 2, I'm zigzagging, 3, 4, and 5. So I've zigzagged back and forth. Let me show you why. So now we've immediately got 5 pieces. They're still attached, but once we trim those ends, and then they'll come apart, and so they'll be separated and the ends will be trimmed all in the same step. I think I'm going to just cut them at an angle. So I'm just going to take my scissors on the side and come down about 3/4 of an inch, and then cut up to the diagonal to that corner. I'll flip it over and do the exact same thing. Because it's accordion, your angles won't be going the same direction. They'll flip-flop back and forth, but I think that's okay with this wreath. And so now we've got all of our pieces cut and ready to go. So we're going to do the exact same thing with our navy and white striped ribbon. Let's go ahead and add in that lower level, and then we'll come back to the upper level. Let's make sure that 1 ribbon's going to be enough. So to add your ribbon tails in, friends, we're going to add 1 ribbon to every set of pipe cleaners on that lower level. You're just going to find the center either by eyeballing it or folding it in half, giving it a pinch, and then that crease will help you identify that center. And then you're just going to pinch and gather right there in the center so it looks like a men's bow tie. Fold that over your thumb or your finger. Find any lower level set of pipe cleaners. Add that center part of your ribbon all the way to the base of that set of pipe cleaners. Give it 2 or 3 tight twists. And then fluff your ribbon tail out. And by fluff, friends, I just mean get it pointing in the right direction and make sure it's not curled up in any way. Normally at this point, if you've made wreaths with me before, I would tell you to trim off your pipe cleaner, but I want to make sure that we're happy with just having 1 ribbon tail per set of pipe cleaners. So let's add a couple more in to make sure that we think that we've made a good decision here. So again, I've just found the center. I just eyeballed it, pinched and pleated in the middle, folded it over my thumb. To make that gentle V, I'm going to the next set of pipe cleaners, adding it all the way down to the center and giving it 2 or 3 tight twists to really hold that tail in there. And then I'm going to fluff out my tail, just making sure it's pointing in the direction I want it to point. I already feel like I'm going to be happy with just one tail, but we're going to add one more just to be sure. Yeah, I think I'm totally happy with that, friends. I'm just going to add 1 tail per. So I'm going to grab my snips here, go back to where I started, and just trim off that excess pipe cleaner. And then if you have like a little nub or whatever, just point that back in. So moving forward on this lower level, every time you add in your tail and get it twisted in, then just go ahead and trim off your pipe cleaner. All right, friends, let's add 1 ribbon tail to each set of pipe cleaners all along this lower level, and then I'll meet you back here. Now we've added 1 tail into every single pipe cleaner on the lower level using that 2.5-inch ribbon. Each tail was cut at 10 inches in length and then angle trimmed on each end. We're going to do the exact same thing for our upper level of chenille stems, friends, only we're going to use our 1.5-inch ribbon. We'll need 5 ribbon tails in total for the upper level using our 1.5-inch wide ribbon. Cut at 10 inches in length and angle trim those ends. Once you get your ribbon tails cut, go ahead and add them into your upper level and trim off those pipe cleaner ends. You guys, how cute is this coming out? So let's go ahead and fluff out our blow. We're going to make this the rough fluff, or the first go around. And to fluff your bow, you're just going to take your loops, put your hands right in the middle of those loops, and fluff them out to make them 3-dimensional. And remember, we used wire ribbon, so they're going to go where you tell them to go. All right, now I'm going to trim my tails. So last but not least, we've got our little patriotic truck. I think I'm going to place it right here, and I'm literally just going to cover that in glue and press that down. I think it's going to stay just fine. So hopefully your glue gun is still nice and hot. So you're just going to squeeze some glue all over this attachment. If you're using a sign, you wouldn't want to glue it unless it was just real thin, like from the Dollar Tree. You would want to attach it with chenille stems or floral wire or something of the sort. Now, because this is metal, that heat's going to go right through. So FYI, in case you're doing the same thing. And then just flip that over, being careful. You get one push, so make sure you've got that where you want it. I'm going to use my scissors to press that down because that guy is hot. Just give it a good 30-second press. That is it, friends. Just look how stunning this wreath came out. I'm so happy with it. I hope you've enjoyed making this wreath with me today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps my little channel to grow. Okay, let's move on to our next design. We're going to create a patriotic door swag using the 5-gallon paint stir stick method. You'll find a full materials list for you below in the description of this video, as well as my Etsy shop link. So if you'd rather just purchase today's design, you'll find that link for you below as well. Okay, let's dive in. The first thing we need to do is build out this 5-gallon paint stir stick. They are 17 inches in length and about 1.5 inches wide. And you're going to need 6 standard pipe cleaners. The first thing we're going to do is right at the top of this paint stir stick, there's a small indentation about 3 inches down. And we're going to anchor our first pipe cleaner right around that indentation. So I've just wrapped that around, tightened it about 3 times. And I'm going to create a loop that's about 2 to 2.5 inches in diameter, and then just wrap this pipe cleaner around itself. And this is actually going to make the loop that you or your customers can utilize to hang this from your front door. There we go. So it should look something like this. That's actually going to be the back side of your design. So we'll flip this over, and now we're going to add the other 5 pipe cleaners. You'll add one right below where we added the hanger, and we're just going to place that in the center and give it 3 or 4 tight twists. We're going to form that into a U and point those ends straight up. They don't have to be perfectly even. If you can see that there, friends, no worries. We'll move on to our next pipe cleaner. So we're going to come to the bottom of that paint stir stick about 1.5 inches above where that paint stir stick ends. And again, wrap that around 2 or 3 times tightly. Form those ends into a U and point them up to the ceiling. Next, we'll add our third pipe cleaner, which is essentially right in the middle of those first pipe cleaners that we added. You're welcome to measure if that is more comfortable for you. Again, a couple of tight twists. Form that into a narrow U and point those ends up to the ceiling. And then the last 2 pipe cleaners, we'll be adding one in between the first and second pipe cleaner, approximately here. And then our last one between pipe cleaners 2 and 3 in the center. Once you've got all of your pipe cleaners added into the paint stir stick, you should have one on the back side for your hanging loop, and then 5 on the front side that are essentially evenly spaced apart. And then we're going to take our hot glue gun and just run a couple of stripes of glue right on top of that pipe cleaner and our paint stir stick to just make sure these guys don't slide around. Once you've added all of those dollops of glue, go ahead and set your paint stir stick off to the side to dry, and we'll prep our deco mesh. So I've grabbed 3 different rolls of 10-inch deco mesh, and let me just take a second to pause here and just remind you that what we're making today is a recipe. Use the colors that you wish, the theme that you wish. Feel free to really make this your own. I thought we would go ahead and make a farmhouse style or country themed patriotic door swag. So I've got a 10-inch roll of burlap with red, white, and blue striping, a 10-inch solid red metallic, and a 10-inch solid blue metallic. We're going to start out with the burlap striped deco mesh. And for this next part, guys, you can either use a good pair of scissors and a ruler to measure your deco mesh pieces, or if you're new to wreath making, I would strongly recommend that you grab a rotary cutter from Amazon and add that to your toolkit along with the self-healing mat that you see here in the background. This just lets you easily measure your mesh and ribbon and cut it smoothly and efficiently with nice clean lines. And remember, we added 5 pipe cleaners to the top of our paint stir stick, so we're going to need 5 pieces of this deco mesh cut at 24 inches in length. So either with your scissors and ruler or your self-healing mat and rotary cutter, go ahead and cut those 5 pieces at 24 inches in length, and I'll meet you back here. Once you've got those first 5 pieces of deco mesh cut, go ahead and bring your paint stir stick back to your work area. We'll set that off to the side just a bit, and we're going to add 1 deco mesh piece into each set of pipe cleaners for this first step, and we're going to make cruffles with our deco mesh. If you're new to working with deco mesh loves to fray, so anything that we can do as creators to help reduce that fray is always ideal, and the Cruffle method is great for that. So that's the method we'll be using today. I would recommend that you have a chip clip or a clothespin handy for this next step. It just makes it a little bit easier. We're going to take a single piece of deco mesh. We're going to bring that to our work area curl side up. I like to lay something in the middle of my deco mesh piece just so it doesn't curl up on me. We're going to come to one end of our deco mesh, and we're going to roll that end in 2 or 3 times. And what that does is tuck away that raw edge to help reduce the fray. Then we're going to pinch that with our clip. We'll spin our piece around. We'll roll that opposite end in 2 or 3 times as well to tuck away that raw edge. Remove your weight and then we're going to scrunch the remaining bits of our mesh. So all we're going to do is press down on that curl with our thumbs, use our remaining 8 fingers to just scrunch and gather or walk that deco mesh back into your hand. And then we'll release that clip, and you've just made a cruffle. And so really what a cruffle is, guys, is a curl on each end and a ruffle in the middle, hence the cruffle. You're going to come into your paint stir stick, and we're just going to start at the top. Take that cruffle, and so the factory edge or the ruffled top is pointing up. We're going to place that right down to the center of our pipe cleaners, all the way down to the base, and give that 2 or 3 tight twists, and then we'll point those pipe cleaners back up. So we've just added our first cruffle. Let's go ahead and make our second cruffle. Release that clip, pinch that cruffle in the middle. This time we're going to go horizontally. So we'll have that factory edge on the side of our paint stir stick. We're going to add that cruffle all the way to the base. Give those pipe cleaners 2 or 3 tight twists. We'll make our third cruffle. We'll release that clip, pinch that in the middle. This time we'll go vertically again, so that ruffled factory edge is pointing up. We're going to place that all the way down to the base of our next set of pipe cleaners, and you guessed it, give them a couple of tight twists. We'll move on to our fourth cruffle. Remove that clip, pinch our cruffle in the middle. This time the factory edge will go horizontally. We're essentially going back and forth in a pattern. We've added that all the way to the base of our next set of pipe cleaners, giving them a couple of tight twists. And it's time to make our last cruffle. Release that clip, pinch that cruffle in the middle. We're going to add that to our last set of pipe cleaners all the way down to the base. Give those pipe cleaners 2 or 3 tight twists. And we've just added our last cruffle into our swag. So this is what it's looking like once we've completed our first layer. That coverage is looking pretty good, but we're going to make that a little bit more dense in coverage. So we're going to set our base off to the side, and then you're going to grab your solid metallic red and solid metallic blue 10-inch deco mesh, and we're going to add 1 curl of each of the colors into every set of pipe cleaner ties on our paint stir stick. So we're going to need 5 pieces of the blue and 5 pieces of the red. We're going to cut those pieces at 10 inches in length. So go ahead and cut 5 pieces of each at 10 inches in length, and I'll meet you back here. Once you've got 5 pieces of the red and 5 pieces of the blue cut, go ahead and grab your paint stir stick swag and bring it back to your work area, and grab that clip, and we're going to make 1 curl of each color to add into all of our pipe cleaners. So to make a curl, you're just going to grab a single piece of deco mesh, lay it in your work area curl side up, and roll that piece of mesh into a cylindrical tube. Just like that. And so it's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter in the center, and then of course it flares at the ends. You'll just grab your clip, pinch that curl in the middle, grab your second color, bring it to your work area, and lay it down curl side up. Roll that piece into a cylindrical tube, and then we'll grab our red curl. We're just going to make a simple sloppy X with those 2 curls. We'll come into our pipe cleaners. We're going to add that deco mesh curl X all the way to the base of the pipe cleaners, right on top of our cruffle. all the way down to the base and give those pipe cleaners a couple of tight twists. So we've just added our first 2 curls. So go ahead and add 1 red and 1 blue curl to every single set of pipe cleaner ties on your swag, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, we've added 1 blue and 1 red curl to every single set of pipe cleaners on our swag, and just look how cute this is. And you guys, something to keep in mind is this also makes a great centerpiece for your dining room table or your fireplace mantle. Super cute and versatile. Okay, so now what we're going to do is add a nice bow to the center of our swag and then some ribbon tails to the remaining pipe cleaner ties. So let's start out with our bow. Let me show you the ribbon I've grabbed here, guys. You can grab the ribbon of your choice. I just recommend getting a mixture of 2.5 and 1.5 inch wide ribbons. So I've got a 2.5 inch patriotic and burlap. I've got a solid navy 1.5, and then I've got some glittered red and glittered white 1.5. Doesn't matter what you choose or how you pair them as long as they're wired. So this is going to be a super easy bow. It's one of my favorite bow recipes for beginners, and it's really very beautiful. So we're going to take our 2.5 inch wired ribbon, and we're going to cut 2 pieces at 24 inches in length. Once I measure that first piece, I just use it then as my guide for my next piece. And you guys, this doesn't have to be perfect. I promise no one's going to be measuring your bows. Then we're going to cut 2 strips of the solid navy at 22 inches in length. And we'll cut 2 strips of the red 1.5 inch glitter ribbon, also at 22 inches in length. And then I've got a single piece of 1.5 inch ribbon that's white with some cute stars. That is 12 inches in length. So as long as you've got 7 ribbon strips in total, you can mix and match them how you wish. And so what I'm going to do at this point is angle trim my ends to all the ribbon strips. To angle trim, you're just going to come down about 1 inch on one side and cut up diagonally to the other side. You can also dovetail, of course, if that's your preference. So let's speed ahead and get these ends all trimmed. And then we'll make our bow. Before we get started on our bow, go ahead and grab a standard pipe cleaner that matches somewhat in color to your ribbon, and just fold that pipe cleaner into a loose V and set it off to the side. Okay, so to make this bow, you're going to grab your first strip of ribbon. I always start with a 2.5 inch. You're just going to fold that in half. Again, not looking for perfection. Then at the halfway point and just back a little bit closer to the closed end, you're just going to pinch and gather that piece just like that, and take that bottom loop and just give it a hard twist under your fingers, because this is going to become your ribbon tail and you want that pretty side up. So it basically looks like an awareness ribbon. So my left hand is going to be my holding hand and my right hand, my working hand. We'll grab our next piece of 2.5 inch. We're going to fold that piece in half. This time we want the closed end to be the opposite end. So here's our closed end facing to the left. So our next one will face to the right. Just pinching and gathering in the center. I'm going to lay that right on top of that first ribbon. And we're going to twist or flip that ribbon tail so it's pretty side up. Just like that. So now we're going to grab a navy blue piece and do the same thing. Fold it in half, and we're going to continue to flip-flop which ends the tails are at versus the loops. So we want loops, tails, as we build our bow. And for this last piece that's only 12 inches, we're going to fold that in half and just place that right on the top. We'll twist that tail later. It's too short to do so now. Grab your pipe cleaner and wrap that right around the middle of your bow stack and flip that around. And then as tight as you can, cinch that pipe cleaner up tight, 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 and give it 3 or 4 tight twists. I'm going to take my scissors then and cut off that excess bit of pipe cleaner. We don't need that. Go ahead and grab your swag base and bring it back to your work area. We're going to add our bow to the center set of pipe cleaners. If you struggle to identify that center set, guys, just flip it over and you want that middle pipe cleaner, and you can just flip it around. We're going to place that bow stack right down in the middle of that pipe cleaner and give it a couple of twists. You want to anchor it down nicely, but don't squish it down so much it recedes and disappears into your swag. Once you have that added, we're going to fluff our bow. I like to do that from the side. So I'm going to pull those tails, those 2.5-inch tails on the bottom, into basically an X pattern. And then I'm going to open up my loops right where they're at. You can certainly fluff your bow how you wish. It just takes a little time, doesn't matter how long you've been making bows, so give yourself some grace and spend some time fluffing. Once you've got that bow fluffed out, we're going to make some ribbon tails for our swag, and we're going to need 4 pieces of the red, 4 pieces of the white, and 4 pieces of the blue. Cut it 10 inches in length and then angle trim or dovetail those ends, and then I'll meet you back here. Once you've got all of your ribbon strips cut, go ahead and bring them back to your work area. We're going to add 1 of each of the colors into each set of pipe cleaners. So I'm just going to go red, white, and blue. Just crisscross them like that. And we're just going to kind of pinch that in the middle a little bit. We'll come to our first set of pipe cleaners, add that ribbon tail bundle all the way down to the base of those pipe cleaners, give them 2 or 3 tight, tight twists. Then I'm just going to use my small snips and trim off the excess bits of those pipe cleaners and curl them back and out of the way. And then I'll fluff out my ribbon tails. And all I'm doing is making sure they're right side up. And I'm going to run my finger over each tail just to give it a little bit of a curve. Just like that. So we're going to add 3 ribbon tails to our remaining pipe cleaner ties. You had 2 below the bow we just added and 2 above. Let's get those added in. You guys, how stinking cute is this store swag coming together? So you can see how this has great coverage and would also make a great centerpiece, as I had mentioned earlier. Okay, we've got one more step for this beauty. This is just a pick of red glittery curls that I grabbed from Hobby Lobby. And we're going to add some of these curls into our swag for that last step. Make sure your hot glue gun is plugged in case it isn't already. I'm just going to trim off that step. These are actually my Work Pro heavy duty cutters. Those are great to save your wrist when you're working with thicker embellishments or florals. So if you can see, these are kind of sectioned off, and I'm going to take those Work Pro cutters and separate this stem into sections. Those curls get tangled up with each other. You might have to uncurl them. See what I mean? So we'll just work that out. And we're just going to then have some little picks here. By separating that out into sections, that actually gave us 3 picks. And so we're going to add one at the top, basically near that top set of pipe cleaners. And so what I'm going to do is on the back side of that pick, I'm going to run a full squeeze or two, or dollop as I call them, of hot glue. And then I'm going to nestle that right down in near the center of that ribbon tail bunch. And I'm going to hold that for about 10 seconds to give it a good amount of time to grab. Then we're going to add one to the very bottom set of pipe cleaners as well. So again, on the back side of that stem, I'm going to give it 2 full squeezes of glue, and then we'll nestle that in right where that bottom set of ribbon tails was added in, and we're going to give it a 10-second hold to give it time to grab. And then I trim down that last sprig into just individual pieces. And what I'm going to do is just add a dollop of glue towards the bottom of those and just kind of sprinkle them throughout the remainder of our swag. And that is it. How stinking cute is that? And what a simple craft. I sure hope you enjoyed creating with me today. If you did, be sure to give this tutorial a thumbs up and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks friends, happy crafting. Okay, let's move on to our next design. Next up, I'm going to teach you how to make a Deco Mesh Cruffles and Ribbon Tails Patriotic Wreath. And before we start cutting our mesh, let me tell you, we are going to split this frame up into basically quarters, okay? So we've got 8 sections between the 2 crossbars, and we're going to fill 2 sections with one type of method and the remaining 6 sections with a different type of method. So hang tight with me, friends. We're going to do 2 different things here to kind of give us a flag look. So go ahead and sit your wreath frame off to the side for just a minute. We're going to talk through that first 2 sections that I told you would be a little bit different first. And before we cut our deco mesh, and again, this is a little bit different than our typical, what I want you to do, friends, so we're going to cut 8 pieces of ribbon for both of these types at 13 inches in length, friends. And so a quick way to do that is just measure out your first piece at 13 inches and then mark that with your finger. Then just take your ribbon and fold it over onto itself 8 times to give you those 8 pieces, and then you're not having to measure each one individually. And it's okay if they're not 100% accurate, friends. Nobody's going to be measuring. And so I'm just folding it over onto itself accordion style 8 times. So there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And once you've got all of your pieces counted out, go ahead and cut off the remaining bits of that ribbon. And so what you've got now, friends, is a ribbon stack. And we're going to separate these and cut our edges at the same time, or cut our ends at the same time. So make sure that your ribbon stack at the end is all together and married up nicely. Then you're going to fold it onto its side here, and knowing the strength of your scissors, to make a dovetail, you're just going to cut on the fold. So you're going to fold that in half, placing your scissors on the folded side, not the open side. You'll come down about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch and then cut up on the diagonal to the corner. And then when you let go, you'll see you've just separated all of those pieces of ribbon and dovetailed your ends in one fell swoop. So it's a super easy, kind of a cheating method. Now you're going to do the same thing at the other end. Just make sure all those ends are married up nicely. Fold them in half. Grab your scissors and cutting on the folded side, not the open side, come down about 3/4 of an inch. Cut up on the diagonal. Take your time. And you've just dovetailed and separated the other end. So see how we just got all of our ribbon measured and the ends trimmed and the ribbon pieces separated all in one quick step. So now I'm just putting them all print side up. into a nice little stack. I'm going to set those guys off to the side. And we're going to do the same thing to our second navy themed wired ribbon. Again, we're going to measure that out into 13-inch tails, and we're going to cut 8 pieces, friends. We may need more, but I'd rather cut on the conservative side. We can always cut a few more if we need. So measure out to that 13-inch mark and just hold it with your finger. And then we're going to fold it over onto itself accordion style 8 times to give us our 8 pieces, just like we did with the other ribbon. And then, just like we did before, make sure those ends are married up nicely. They should be pretty good. Then fold them in half long ways. Grab your scissors and cutting on the fold side, come down about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch and then cut up diagonally to that corner. And that's going to separate your ribbon tails at that end and give them the dovetail. You could also angle cut if you'd rather angle cut. Now flip your ribbon stack over. Do the exact same thing. Make sure those ends are married up nicely. Fold them in half. Grab your scissors and come down 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch on that fold and cut up diagonally to the corner. And once again, friends, we've just separated our ribbons. We've cut all 8 pieces that we need and dovetailed in one fell swoop. So I'm just going to lay these out pretty side up, just like we did with our previous ribbons. All right, friends, scoot your ribbons off to the side and go ahead and grab your 10-inch white deco mesh and your scissors or your rotary cutter. And what we're going to do at this point, friends, we are going to cut 16 pieces at 15 inches in length. So with your scissors or your rotary cutter, just measure out that deco mesh and we're going to cut it at 15 inches to give us 15-inch cuts, and you're going to need 16 pieces. So go ahead and cut your 16 pieces of just the white deco mesh at 15 inches in length, and I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, we've got our 16 pieces of white deco mesh cut at 15 inches in length. We've pre-cut our navy themed ribbon, and it's time to add our first section into our wreath. And again, friends, this is just a recipe, so feel free to tweak this recipe and recreate it any way you'd like. So making sure that your chip clip is within arm's reach, the first thing we're going to do, friends, is make some cruffles. So each bundle that we add into the wire frame will consist of 2 cruffles and 2 ribbons that we'll secure with one of our pipe cleaners and then add into our wreath frame. So let's make our first stack. If you're new to deco mesh wreath making or to cruffles, what you're going to do is grab one piece of your 10-inch deco mesh that you've cut, and you'll see that the mesh likes to curl in on itself. So you're going to want your mesh to be curl side up. And what I'd like you to do, friends, is just at both ends, roll that piece of deco mesh in onto itself a couple of times. And what that does is tuck away those raw edges of your deco mesh to help prevent the fray. And then you'll just scrunch it together in the middle to make a small cruffle. And then you're going to grab your chip clip and just pinch that cruffle in the middle to hold it securely while we make our second cruffle. Grab another piece of 10-inch deco mesh that we've cut at 15 inches, and following that same method, friends, let each end roll in onto itself 1 or 2 times. Just make sure those raw edges are tucked away, and then scrunch and gather in the middle until your hands meet, and you've made cruffle number 2. And what we're going to do with those cruffles, friends, is just cross them over onto their self into an X. And then you're going to grab 1 ribbon of each type. What I'm going to do here, friends, I'm just going to take 1 of each of our ribbon types and place one on top of the other. And then just eyeballing where that middle is, just take your fingers and pinch it together until it looks something like this, like a men's bow tie, and place that right on top of your two cruffles. So it should be centered basically for both. And then you're going to grab a pipe cleaner, wrap that around your cruffle and ribbon stack, flip it upside down, and just give it a couple of tight twists to hold those guys together. And then come over to your wire wreath frame, and we're going to fill 2 sections with these cruffle and ribbon stacks, friends. So we've got 2 ribbons and 2 cruffles in the stack. We've secured it with our Chanel stem or pipe cleaner, and we're going to fill 2 sections, so basically a quarter of this wire wreath frame with this particular type. And we're going to add, I believe we may add more, 4 per section for a total of 8. And I'm going to add them in kind of back and forth. So the first cruffle and ribbon stack, I'm going to tie around rings 1 and 2. And then the second stack, I'll tie around rings 2 and 3. And then I'll come back to 1 and 2. So we're bouncing back and forth. That'll give us extra fullness. And so all you're going to do, friends, is flip it over. We've taken our pipe cleaners or our Chanel stems. We've wrapped it around rings 1 and 2, or the inner and the middle. And we're going to just give them 2 or 3 tight twists. We're not going to trim them off yet. I'm just going to point them to the inside so they're out of our way. And we'll worry about fluffing our ribbons and curls in just a short bit. So we've added our first cruffle and ribbon stack. Let's make our second. We're going to take our 10-inch Deco mesh, roll it in onto itself on each end. So our Deco mesh is curl side up. And I'm just rolling it a couple of times just to tuck away that raw edge. And then I'm just going to scrunch and gather in the middle until my hands meet. And I'll take my chip clip to hold that guy right in the center. And we're going to make another one exactly the same way. I've grabbed a piece of Deco mesh. It's curl side up. I'm curling in both ends 1 or 2 times just to tuck away that raw edge. And then I'm just scrunching and gathering in the middle until my hands meet. I'm going to come back over here to my ribbon. I'm going to come back over here to my cruffle stack, lay one on top of the other into an X, and then I'm going to grab each of my ribbons, just 1 piece each. I'm going to lay one on top of the other and then just eyeballing it, friends. Again, we're not looking for perfection. Just pinch and gather in the middle. I'm going to add that right on top of my cruffle stack. So we've got 2 cruffles and 2 ribbons. And now I'm grabbing a pipe cleaner. I'm just going to grab that pipe cleaner, wrap that right around my cruffle and ribbon stack. I'm going to give it 2 or 3 tight twists. And then I'm going to come over to my wire wreath frame, and we're going to add this guy in. And again, we're not worrying about fluffing our ribbons out at this point. As long as they're facing upwards, the print side is up, you are good. So when we added our first cruffle and ribbon stack, friends, we wrapped our pipe cleaner around rings 1 and 2. And remember, I said we're going to go back and forth. So this second cruffle and ribbon stack, this time we'll wrap it around rings 2 and 3. We want to bounce back and forth just to give extra fullness. So I've wrapped it around rings 2 and 3, and I'm just going to give it a couple of tight twists. I'm going to point those Chanel stems back towards the center of the wreath. And now we've added 2 of our 4 cruffle and ribbon stacks into that first section. So we're going to complete this section together, and then we'll speed through. So let's go ahead and make our next cruffle and ribbon stack. Grab a piece of Deco mesh, roll each end onto itself, just a couple of times to tuck away that raw edge. Scrunch and gather in the middle until your hands meet. Grab your chip clip and pinch that cruffle in the middle and set it off to the side. And we're going to grab another piece of Deco mesh and do the exact same thing. Let's curl side up. A couple of rolls on each end to tuck away that raw edge. Scrunch and gather in the middle. We're going to lay that on top of the first cruffle we made. We'll grab 2 ribbons, one of each different type. Lay one on top of the other, just eyeballing to find that middle, pinch and gather, and lay those 2 ribbons right on top. So you've got 2 cruffles and 2 ribbons, and it's time to grab a pipe cleaner. And you're just going to wrap that pipe cleaner right around the middle of your cruffle and ribbon stack. I'll flip that over and give it a few tight twists. Probably 3 or 4. We'll come back to our wire frame, and so we first add cruffle and ribbon stack. We wrapped it around rings 1 and 2. Our next one we wrapped around rings 2 and 3. So we're going to bounce back again and wrap our third one around rings 1 and 2. So I'm just wrapping those pipe cleaners right around rings 1 and 2. I'm going to flip it over and just give it a couple of tight twists. 3 or 4 is probably about all you need. And we'll point those guys somewhat towards the center so they don't get in the way. So we've added our third, and we're going to add 1 more to this section. And then we'll jump to the next section. I think we're okay just to zoom through these parts, friends. And so what I want you to do is add 1 more to this section, then add 4 to the neighboring section, and then I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, we've just added 8 in total cruffle and ribbon stacks into 2 sections. So you've got 4 cruffle and ribbon stacks in each section for a total of 8. And each of your cruffle stacks should be 2 cruffles and 2 ribbons that you've added in. And when you first look at it, you're probably thinking, gosh, that doesn't look like much. So what we've not done yet, friends, is fluff out our ribbons. And so all you have to do, I'm just going to show you this real quickly, friends, so you can see what it's going to look like once we're finished, is pull those ribbon stacks into an X, so that the same ribbon type, you can see that it's stars going one way and stripes going the other, into a loose X, and then you just take your fingers, because it's wired, and kind of give it a little bit of a curvature. And it doesn't matter which way the ribbons go, you can alternate back and forth between the 2. You just want that nice, clean X. And then, you know, just give your ribbons a little bit of a curve and a bump here. And you're going to do that to all of your ribbon stacks. So I'm just pulling each stack into an X, and then taking my fingers and running them over the ribbons to give them some curve. And we'll go back through once we've finished the entire wreath, friends. I just wanted to give you a visual of what you could expect this beauty to look like once we're all done. There you go, friends. You can kind of see what this will look like once we finish. All those ribbons will be going in all different kinds of directions, giving it lots of life and texture. But now we need to finish building our wreath out. And so we've just done 2 sections, friends. And so you can see on the back, it's still a little bit of a mess. We've left our pipe cleaners or chenille stems there, which we're going to continue to do for now. But we need to build out the remaining sections of our wreath. And so let's set this guy off to the side so we can move on to cutting our next ribbon. So this time we're going to use our red themed ribbon. And I've just grabbed this red and white striped and some red, white, and blue stars. And we've only done 2 of the 8 sections, friends. So the remaining 6 are going to be filled with this ribbon type. And so we're going to need 24 cuts of each ribbon measured at 13 inches in length. So just like before, friends, measure out your ribbon to 13 inches. And you're going to have to do this in 2 attempts. I'm going to fold it over onto itself 12 times, and then I'll do it again because we need 24 cuts of each, and my scissors, you know, can't handle 24. So you're just going to fold it over onto itself 12 times. So we've folded it over onto itself 12 times accordion style, friends, and I've just married up my ends here to make sure that they are all meeting nicely. And then just like before, friends, you're going to fold that in half onto itself, grab your scissors, and coming down about 3/4 of an inch on the folded side, you'll then cut up diagonally to give you that dovetail. And then we'll flip over to the other end and do the exact same thing. So now I'm just going to put them all pretty side up into a stack, and then we'll move on to the second half. All right, friends, we've finished our second stack of 12 dovetailed ribbon tails at 13 inches in length. And now we need to repeat that step one more time with our 1.5 inch starred ribbon. And again, you're going to want to cut 24 pieces at 13 inches in length and dovetail your ends, and then I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, now that we've cut the remainder of our ribbon tails, you should have 24 of each type cut at 13 inches in length and dovetailed or angle-tailed if that's your preference. And our next step is to prepare our deco mesh. Go ahead and grab your red and white. You'll notice, friends, that we didn't actually end up using the navy blue. I felt like that would be too dark for our wreath. So grab your white 10-inch deco mesh and your red 10-inch deco mesh. We are going to need 24 pieces of each type at 15 inches in length. So go ahead and get your deco mesh cut and put off to the side, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, friends, so now you should have 24 cuts of your red and white and 24 cuts of your solid white, each one at 15 inches in length. Let's go ahead and grab our work wreath frame here, and we'll start on adding in our next layers. We'll just do one together. This is going to follow the exact same pattern as our navy and white themed. So we're going to grab a piece of our deco mesh, curl side up. We'll just tuck in each edge here and curl it under just to tuck away those raw edges, and then we'll scrunch and gather into our hands. Grab our chip clip and pinch that guy together right in the middle. And now we'll do the same thing with our white piece. So every Cruffle stack is going to have one piece of red deco mesh Cruffle and one white deco mesh Cruffle. Following that same method. So we're just going to cross the white over the red, or the red over the white, it matters not. Then you'll grab one of each of the 2 ribbon types. So just like before, friends, lay that ribbon one on top of the other. Just eyeball the center and pinch and gather. Then lay the 2 ribbons right on top of the 2 pieces of deco mesh Cruffle. Grab your pipe cleaner. Wrap that around your Cruffle and ribbon stack. Give it a couple of tight twists. I find it easier to hold my pipe cleaner stationary and then spin my deco mesh Cruffle and ribbon stack. Come into your next section on your wreath frame. And just going in line with our pattern, friends, just like we had done before, we wrapped it around rings 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 1 and 2, 2 and 3. So we're back to the 1 and 2. And again, just wrap that pipe cleaner right around the rings. give it several tight twists, and then scooch that guy over. And just like before, friends, we'll be adding 4 Cruffle and ribbon stacks to each section. So go ahead and create your Cruffle and ribbon stacks, adding 4 to each section. Work your way all through the rest of the remainder of your wreath, and I'll meet you back here. Oh my goodness, you guys, I am so excited and pleasantly surprised with how fantastic this wreath is really turning out. We've not even went through and fluffed or cleaned up our ribbon tails, and look how amazing it's turning out to be. I'm so excited. Let's go ahead and flip our wreath over and also plug in your hot glue gun. What I want you to do is to grab a good pair of scissors or your snips, and we're going to go through and basically trim off all of the tails of our pipe cleaners or chenille stems. Make sure you leave about, 1/8 of an inch of a nub on those pipe cleaners, just so they don't come unraveled, and just work your way through the entire back of our wreath here and trim these guys off. Let's zoom through. As you trim off your pipe cleaner tails, just go ahead and take your fingers and point them down so that they are nice and flat. All right, go ahead and flip your wreath back over, and the last step to this beauty is just fluffing out our ribbon tails. And all you need to do, starting at one area, remember we've got 2 ribbon tails per Cruffle bunch, you're just going to take those ribbon tails and form them into a loose X, and really work your way around your entire wreath. And as you go, take your fingers and run them up and over your ribbons, which will give them a little bit of curl and help give them that definition. And there it is, friends. We have finished our super cute deco mesh and ribbon tail wreath with no signs, no florals, and no extra bows. And look how stunning this beauty turned out. Happy crafting.